Hello everybody, Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to Season 4 of Highside, Lowside, and of course, if I'm talking at you, that means you're about to hear the very sultry voice of one Spurg Dunbar.
So we are back for an all-new season. We tried to keep the interim brief. We've got a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. We've got Jen Dunstan, who is the newest media lead for RevZilla. She's going to be joining us. We're going to do a quick Q&A with her, and then we're going to get into some of the bigger topics. And really what this episode is going to focus on today is some of the current events, some of the new motorcycles we've seen released, and really we're looking at almost a little over a year since the pandemic has started, and what's the effect been on motorcycling. So there's a lot of great current event stuff that we're going to dive into in this episode.
I'm excited to get into it, and of course introduce all of you to Jen, who's a total badass, as you'll see. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Motul.
So as we're kicking off Season 4, I just wanted to take a second and thank both Motul for all the work they've done as a sponsor, but really also thank the audience, because there's probably some of you out there that haven't realized this, but at the end of Season 3, we ended up with not just one of the top motorcycle podcasts, but we were actually ranking in the top 10 in the US for automotive podcasts, and we were like right below Click and Clack on NPR for podcasts. And for me, I grew up listening to Click and Clack with my dad, so like that was actually a really big deal.
Yeah, I grew up listening to them also. Being on any list with Click and Clack was a huge honor. So this is the time when we thank you for listening, writing in, and leaving reviews. And of course, we have to thank Motul, because in addition to making fine lubricant and oil products, they support this show, and they allow us to spend all the money it costs to put this together and broadcast it to you. So thanks to you and to Motul.
And I specifically want to thank Motul for letting me have the creative freedom to come up with all kinds of oil swigging, Sylvester Stallone, like over the top references. I'm actually really excited to see what they're going to let me get away with Season 4. So thanks to all of you out there.
Time will tell. So thank you again from the deepest, darkest parts of Spurgeon's heart and mine. And let's move right along. I think if memory serves, if I remember how to do this, we got a T-shirt to give away.
This is the point in the podcast where we give away a T-shirt. and the biggest change for Season 4 is I'm going to teach Zack how to just arbitrarily give out T-shirts on the back end. So like, who knows how many T-shirts we're going to give away this season. But for right now, the winner of the first T-shirt for Season 4 is Happy Customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there must have been a Happy Customer 1, a Happy Customer 2, all the way up to 6 at this point. So now we have Happy Customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And I mean, if we were going to make up the name of a person and fake a review here, we would lean into it, believe us. But this particular happy customer wrote in and said, I'm 55 years old and I just started riding this past year. I don't have a lot of friends who are into motorcycling, so I don't have anybody to talk about it. The podcast with Zack and Spurge makes you feel like you're sitting around talking with your buddies about riding. So we are real suckers for flattery, as you all probably know. But what we really wanted was this new rider who is 55 years old and evidently a happy customer to have a fresh T-shirt. So happy customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, please write into Highside Lowside at RevZilla.com and claim your swag.
I mean, also, Zack empathizes with people that don't have a lot of friends. So he really wanted to like lean in and kind of.
Yeah. And a happy customer, like if you're doing anything on Saturday, just let me know. I'm around. So whatever,
just for those of you out there that aren't familiar with this, maybe you're tuning into the podcast the first time, we need you to leave an Apple iTunes review. So we go through the Apple iTunes reviews. They're the main factor in where we rank on those podcasts. So those stats that we were giving out earlier, you all are helping us do that. So to reward people for leaving the Apple iTunes reviews, we do pick our favorite ones and we send out a free T-shirt for every episode. So leave us an Apple iTunes review, get a free T-shirt, and I think it's now time to kick this podcast off.
Yes. So let's bring in the real star here, Jen Dunstan, our new colleague, and we can start talking about motorcycles.
All right. So we are here with our newest co-host, Jen Dunstan. Jen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Lovely.
We're much better since you got here. That's for sure. It was a real nightmare beforehand. Believe us.
I mean, I think for us, we're just excited to bring the podcast back. We got Season 4. We're kicking it off with you, and we get to talk about motorcycles for the next hour or so. So can't be that bad. But
so
good.
The first thing we wanted to do, Jen, is we have had the pleasure of getting to know you recently, but the podcast listeners, of course, have not. So this is our chance to kind of shed a little light on your career and what led you to RevZilla and who you are as a motorcyclist. So we're going to do a little lightning round question. And for the viewers and listeners out there, Jen does not have any idea what these questions are. She's fairly nervous about it, but I think it's all going to go pretty well. So we're just going to start slinging questions at you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we were giving her some math questions earlier, and she wasn't doing too well with those. So we'll go back to some motorcycling questions. So Jen, the first question is, how did you get into motorcycling / what was your first motorcycle?
Ooh, that is a good one. Both my parents were riders. My mom worked for Harley-Davidson for a couple of years before I was born as well. So there was already a little bit of a motorcycling culture happening in the family. So I kind of grew up around in a household with just Harley-Davidson paraphernalia everywhere. I'm not kidding. They had everything, like a piggy bank. I had a Harley-Davidson piggy bank when I was a kid.
Did you
hats.
have the Harley-Davidson bathroom seat or like the toilet cover?
I don't think they had made those yet. This is a long time ago, but like we had so much stuff everywhere. So I always kind of wanted to ride a bike at some point. And so when I turned 16, I asked my parents and they said, sure. And so I took the MSF course and that's how I started. And so great story. I thought my first bike would be my mom's Aramachi. And so I spent a whole New England winter in our freezing cold garage meticulously polishing the thing because it hadn't been touched in years. It was rusty and everything. So I fully restored her bike almost. And then that spring, they actually bought me a Honda Rebel 250. So that became my first bike. So I basically detailed my mom's bike. She's like, thanks, here's a Rebel. You get to have this now.
That's super refreshing, I feel like, because how often do we hear the story of like, my parents would never let me get a bike, so I had to wait until I was 18 or like when I moved to college or when I moved out or whatever. And whereas you turned 16, your parents were like, yep, sounds good. Yeah. Here's a Rebel.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
I also want to mention too, they're like, she's probably going to fail. Like she's terrible at riding it, but she's awful at riding bicycles. So I don't think she's going to make it. So this class will be good. It'll just get out of her mind that she wants to do this. Boy, were they wrong.
Right. And here we are all these years later. And it should be said, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but needless to say, you didn't exactly carry on the torch of sort of like Harley-Davidson paraphernalia. You've branched off in some different directions with your motorcycling than just Harleys.
Yeah, I like to ride all the bikes, so I got paraphernalia from everyone now.
What's the which road race track is that behind you on the wall? I'm assuming that's a road race circuit.
Yeah, that would be Laguna Seca. It's a little cut off at the top there.
Never heard of it. Anyway, so next question. We often get the question, and I'm sure you've already started to get it. Is how did you get going in sort of motorcycle journalism, or how did you end up at RevZilla? Your path is unique. So how did you end up being a media lead at RevZilla? What were the jobs you had before this?
Yeah, man, it's been quite a few now I think about it. But I started in the industry in a design position. Actually, way back, I started out by selling suits and jackets at the Dainese store in Orange County. That's where the real start was.
Right.
I moved to California. I was trying to get a job as a designer. I have a degree in design. But without any past experience working in the industry, kind of no one would hire you. And so I was like, well, I could definitely sell gear to people. So I'm going to start there. And it was a good time. I really enjoyed selling, Dainese at the store there. And I just happened to run into Troy Lee of Troy Lee Designs one day. I recognized him. He's a very recognizable person. I helped him out with some really cool Gore-Tex sets. And I just asked him, like, are you guys hiring? Like, I have a design portfolio. Can I send it to you?
Nice.
And the rest is history. I sent it out to him. I interned with them for a bunch of years. Then I worked for them. And there's kind of just been a bunch of different steps along the road working in the industry for me. So
where was the last one? Like when you came to RevZilla, like where did you come from?
Yeah, so my previous job before RevZilla was as a Southwest District Manager for Husqvarna and Gas motorcycles.
There you go.
So, right. Yeah, so they're exciting brands. They've got a lot going on. Gas just came out of the gate swinging and Supercross, and they've sold a ton of bikes. I know that just from the couple of years I was there selling them. So.
I would say Husky and Gas, for those of you listening and you're not in the know, are owned by KTM. So you're in good company, Jen. You're in good company.
That's right.
I was waiting for you to find an excuse to mention KTM here, so there it is.
Well, Spurgeon has a reputation for a KTM lover on Highside, Lowside, and I now having a Husqvarna and Gas a former employee. We're really sort of like stacking all the. I don't know what I am. I'm just a black sheep.
Don't act like you don't have a KTM in the garage, Mr. Quartz. We both know you.
I do. It's true. So I guess we're
we're
really
all
biased.
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's tie that right into what are the bikes that you currently have in the garage right now? What are your bikes that you own at the moment?
Okay. I have a 1974 Honda CB360, Honda Hawk, a 1982 Honda Hawk. That's a kind of a project bike right now. I also have a. I'm trying to think of the years of all of them. I can't think.
You don't have to be too specific.
I would say if you've got so many that you're forgetting the years, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's rifle them off then. A YZ250F Supermoto trim bike. We also have a Yamaha R1 and a Yamaha R6. We have a Ducati 996. We have two Altas, so the MX and the EX version.
And you used to work for Alta, correct? That was also part of one of your many jobs. Okay.
Totally. Yeah, those are phenomenal bikes. I talk about them too much, honestly. And I feel like I'm forgetting one.
And when she says we, you're including your husband's. This is a joint collection, right?
This is a household community garage. Although his TC250. I was gonna say that's the one I probably don't ride very much. Oh, and my FE250, and he also has a KTM EX 525.
I like how like the list just keeps going. She's like, I think I forgot
seriously.
one, and then it's like, oh well, there's an FE250, there's a 350 in there. Yeah, so
I think we have 11 altogether right now.
No Harley-Davidsons. What did mom and dad think about that?
I think my mom got over that a long time ago. When I bought a SV650 in college, we had a sit down talk about that's not an American-made motorcycle and how disappointed she was. And then she's gotten over it since then. So
right on.
So Jen, you're the black sheep of your family, coming home with those Japanese motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think my dad was an enabler in that too, because he secretly wanted to go race that at Loudon one day.
Right.
So he had ulterior motives, but he totally pinned it on me so mom could get mad at just me.
Nice. Classic family dynamic there. Okay, so next question. This one's a little bit more broad. Do you have a favorite motorcycle road in America? Have you ever gone on a ride and been like, oh man, this is the road that I would come back to if I could come back to anyone?
Street or dirt? You could do either.
Yeah,
street or dirt.
It can be any place really.
Oh no. Oh, guys, there's so many good ones. Honestly, like, and I have to say, there's some I've ridden and I don't know the names of them. Like, I went and watched a AMA round at VIR and just went riding Blue Ridge somewhere out there. I had like one extra day and I went riding and I have no idea if it was actually on the Blue Ridge Highway or if it was off of it, but man, it was killer. And here in SoCal, there's so many good roads. I mean, I'm partial to, it's right near Palomar, but it's not Palomar. It's Mesa Grande. Everyone on this podcast, keep it secret.
It's okay. No one listens to this podcast anyway, so.
So Zach and I were talking earlier, and like, I know that you're such a fan of where you live out in like the middle of nowhere in San Diego. I was expecting you to come with like all these, because like for those of you listening, Jen had come to visit us in Philadelphia recently to shoot some product video, and we took her out for Mexican food, and she was like, "This is swill." Like the fact that you would serve me this pile of enchiladas and pass it off as Mexican food. She's like, "I'm going to take you to San Diego, where Mexican food comes from Mexico." And like she had a lot of like pride in like her home. I was expecting her to get all of like the San Diego riding area.
I didn't quite put it like that, guys.
It should be said that Jen is a New Englander. If you go back far enough, as Ari Henning is, as I am. So it's odd that we're all sort of Northeasterners in our own respect, even though like Jen and Ari and I scattered out to California, and Spurgeon is.
I'm still here in the cold wasteland of the Northeast.
with your cold, terrible Mexican food.
Listen, it was just the micheladas. I feel that the food was okay. It was just it's not a michelada. I'm going to stand by that.
All right. So we've got two final questions before we get into the topic. So, Jen, what is your most memorable motorcycle experience?
I mean, I would have to be getting married at a racetrack.
We were hoping you were going to say something different, so we could be like, you got married at a racetrack. Yeah. So you nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that was definitely once in a lifetime. Hopefully. It was a good time for everyone. So like the whole morning was like a very traditional ceremony, and we got married on the start finish line. And then there was cake and there's food and there's a DJ and there's like a little bit of dancing, but then the whole second half was a legit track day. And it was so much fun because a lot of our East Coast friends can't come over and experience track riding with us here much on the West Coast. So it was really special to have all those important friends and family come join us at the track on the West Coast. So it was an awesome time.
Did you have enough bikes that you just supplied bikes for everybody, or how did you figure that out?
Because your garage has 75 motorcycles in it, so you're like, don't worry, everybody, just ride one of ours.
Back then, we didn't quite have the same collection. We had a one-car garage, so it was really not happening. But we had a bunch of friends who are also awesome here on the West Coast that were willing to share. So collectively, I think we had like 12 motorcycles. Nice. We all took turns. And Chuckwall is a big track to only have 12 motorcycles on, so everyone really got to boogie out there and enjoy that track to its fullest. So
that is exceptionally cool, obviously. Okay, last question. This one I hope sort of stumps you, but I'm curious what you'll say. Pick one. What's your favorite? Supercross or MotoGP?
No. MotoGP.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was secretly hoping that you'd say that.
I
but
mean,
you're a fan of both, are you not?
I really love Supercross too, but if you're going to force me to choose, I'm going to have to go MotoGP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is it like where your heart lies, or is it the prestige of it? What was it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they're both insane competitors. What they do is phenomenal, but I can relate a little bit more to MotoGP riders because I have dragged knee. Like, I've never hit a triple in my life. I don't know that I will, you know? I totally respect how insane that must be, but at least I have some more relatability with the MotoGP stars. And
Sure.
the production they put on is so good. I think it's better than F1. Like, here come all the angry car nerds going to come scream at us.
You're going to piss off a lot of F1 people.
I don't know. I don't think that. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be surprised if we got people defending F1 in the comment section, but maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'd be a fun discussion. I just feel like MotoGP lays out the data and shows you views of the racing that is top level, bar none. So it's that much more exciting to watch and witness when the production's that good.
Agree. Well, it warms my heart also that you and I can talk about MotoGP, and Spurgeon can kind of twiddle his thumbs and his smile will slowly turn upside down. And
I don't like this image that's being painted of me as someone that doesn't enjoy MotoGP. I just don't follow it the way you guys follow it. That's the only difference.
It's fair.
Spurge, you need to get on our level.
I know. I need more hours in the day to keep up with all of it. But all right, so that's a great introduction to Jen. For those of you out there that are experiencing Jen for the first time, make sure you check out some of her articles on Common Tread, and there's going to be plenty of video content with Jen as well. But there's nothing but a warm welcome from all of us here as we bring Jen into the fold.
And it's relentless. We're just going to start talking about bikes, and we're going to expect you to come out swinging. And considering how hard you were able to lean on Spurgeon about Mexican food in Philadelphia, I assume you'll have no problem telling him that he's full of crap about his motorcycle opinions as well.
My God.
So we're looking forward to that. So the
speaking of full of crap, let's dive right in.
So the broad topic today is motorcycles that we have ridden in the past couple months. Of course, Highside, Lowside has been on a break, and there's been a fair amount that's happened, not least of which we have experienced announcements of new bikes, and we've actually ridden some of the new 2021 models. So we're gonna dive. I'm gonna let Spurgeon Dunbar dive right in, with whatever bike he wants to start with first, and we'll start chewing some of the stuff over because I think there's been a lot of interesting stuff happen in the last couple months.
The one that I want to jump into first is one that we've all ridden, right? Because there's going to be a couple on this list where one of us is going to have more experience than the other. But the one bike that we've all ridden has been the new 2021 Triumph Trident. And I want to start with this one because there was a bit of dissenting opinions. So just a quick 60-second backstory. Recently, when I was at the Pan America launch, we all got together in the West Coast office. Zack and Jen and Ari and Spencer and myself, we all had lunch together. Steven was there, our editor on the West Coast. And Spencer looked me right in the eye. And this was like the day after Jen and Zack and Ari had gone out to ride these bikes. And he goes, I just want to let you know that I fundamentally disagree with your assessment of the electronic controls on the Triumph Trident. It was very complicated to use. Now, for those of you listening, Spencer is probably one of the more tech-savvy people on the team. He can figure stuff out. And the fact that he couldn't figure out the Triumph Trident dash leaves me pause for concern, because I did, and I stand behind the fact that it was a pretty simple layout as far as bikes go.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And quick background on that bike, in case you're not familiar, this Triumph Trident is the latest triple that Triumph released. It's sort of a neoclassic, retro-styled naked bike for about $8,000, I think, with a lot of technology.
$8,095. Let's just say $8,100 to be safe.
Okay, $8,100. So I think that makes it basically it makes it by far the cheapest triple that you can get from Triumph, and perhaps even the cheapest bike. Is it cheaper than a Street Twin?
Yeah, it is now the cheapest bike in Triumph's lineup. So the main question that I have for both of you, because I really liked the engine. Now the engine didn't have the same pop and character as the Street Triples, but it's also arguably about 35 horsepower less than the Street Triple, aimed more as an all-arounder for people stepping up into their second bike. But I still felt that the engine had a lot of I like the engine.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Ari's biggest argument was he didn't feel it had the same character, but I'd be interested to hear the two of you as to, you've both ridden this bike. Like, how did you feel about the engine specifically?
First things first, I want to hear what Jen has to say about the dash. Did you have any trouble with the dash, Jen?
The thing is, I have trouble with every dash, so I don't. I wouldn't call myself the most tech savvy of this group here, and actually, I've only been around so many different dashes. Like, I was selling Husqvarna's and, aware of what KTM's doing. But when it comes to riding so many different brands and marks like you guys have, I haven't actually had the chance to play with a lot of them in recent years. So I'm kind of in catch-up mode, and I'm still learning all the dashes. So I kind of set them and forget them, and that's all I do.
Okay.
But I think that's a good thing. Like, the fact that you aren't, so you're not familiar with all these different models. Did you have trouble using the dash on the Trident?
No, but I didn't really fiddle with it much. Like, I think I changed sport, like one of the modes once, and that was it.
Yep.
So
my thing was the there's so much dead space on the dash. Like, it's just a sort of like clean round thing, but it's not all TFT. It's sort of like has a little screen and then an LCD screen that lights up for the tack, and it's neatly designed and it's well put together, but they didn't, instead of just having one whole face that was TFT that they could sort of arrange in any way they wanted to, they chose to break it up. And it's odd to me that it has big areas of space that is not used for any amount of display of information whatsoever, and that makes the other stuff look kind of small and hard to see. I don't know.
I guess for me, like, that's part of what I liked about it. There's so many dashes now where they try to like the Pan America comes to mind, right? Where they try to cram so much information in it that, like, everything is just numbers everywhere you look, and that to me makes it hard to read. I guess what I liked about the Trident was there was all that space. It was easy to read the tack. It was easy to read the speedo, and especially if you've used some of the other Triumphs. Some of the other Triumphs, they have this like tack layout where you can't tell where you're even at in the RPM range. So I guess for me, like, I like the simplicity of it, especially for a rider that is coming into it as maybe their second bike. It's not overly complicated. It's not overly jumbled with information. It just gives you the bare necessities.
Yeah.
I agree. The negative space is good for drawing the eye to like where it needs to go, but I do wish the data was displayed a little bit larger.
Right.
I felt like some of the characters could have been just a little bit more enlarged, but
That's fair. So, engine review, Jen?
I thought it was fine. It was fun. It was peppy. Like, it wasn't gutless at all. You give it a little throttle and it would respond. So I was happy with it. And I mean, I really enjoyed the handling aspects of that bike the most. So the motor is just fine the way it is. And then what it can do in the corners is really where that bike sings for me.
So speaking of dissenting opinions, and we're going to sort of merge into another bike that I think we all have opinions on, even though Spurgeon has not ridden the latest and greatest version of it. We also rode the MT-07, you and I basically at the same time, Jen. And so I'm curious, from an engine standpoint, do you go MT-07 or Trident?
I mean, I think the MT-07 has a little bit more character and a little bit more grunt. I don't know what the back-to-back horsepower is on those. Like, I don't think that we have a claimed horsepower for the MT-07 right now. But I think it is a little bit more powerful over the Trident. And I think it does have a little bit more. It's more animalistic. It's like more character and vibrating, and it is fun. So I'll give the MT-07 that. Like the motor is definitely fun, but I mean the Trident is just like a hair below it. So it's not like drastic.
Here's what I like, right? And again, so I have not ridden the newest MT-07. I've ridden up to the newest MT-07.
But we should say the updates are minor. They did a dash, they did a handlebar thing, but in large part it's the same basic bike. So Spurgeon's not talking out of his backside here, just so everyone knows.
Like I usually am. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, but what I would say is that for me, I like the character of the MT-07 engine better. So for Ari to make the comment about like, oh, the Triumph doesn't have any character, I can understand what he's coming from if you're comparing those side by side. But what I liked about the Trident for someone coming into this as a new bike is that up to like 4,000 to 5,000 RPM, the Triumph is relatively docile. You can still have fun with it, but it's nice and smooth. It's not that torque that I think Jen is talking about where, that MT-07 at like 2,000, 3,000 RPM, it's like, that's where it is. Let's go have some fun. I think with the Trident, if you're riding it at the upper end of the RPM, there's a lot of life that comes to it. And I think that's almost a good thing for someone moving into that second bike world, is that it is a very approachable, friendly motorcycle compared to something like the MT-07, which I agree with Jen, is a bit more animalistic.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's the MT-07 has a wild side that you kind of wouldn't expect from a $7,700 bike, which is, as you said, it's sort of like the second tier up from basement for a lot of brands, and you wouldn't necessarily expect that bike to be the one that's like, let's go do something crazy, but it does have that side to it, which is interesting.
How did you guys like the so I'm going to stay out of this one, but for I know Jen commented on the chassis. I think Triumph has always done a very good job with their chassis. How did you like the two side by side? And I guess I'll start with you, Zach, for your comparison of those two. How did you like those?
So there's no question that the MT-07 is a lower quality piece when it comes to fueling and the chassis, like compared to the Trident. I don't think there's any argument there really. But I like the MT-07. I think that it's like it's not bad in a way that's, I don't know, it's not like sloppy in a way that I feel like is super detrimental to having fun while you're riding a motorcycle. It is a little bit disappointing. Like I ride the bike and I think, really, did someone ride this and think, yep, we nailed it. That's exactly what we wanted. And so that confuses me and I find it frustrating, especially when you ride the Triumph, which is realistically in the same approximate price point, and the fueling is just butter. It's perfect. And the brakes are so sharp and good, and the chassis is just so much more stable. And so that's what gets me about it, is that what does Triumph have some secret that Yamaha hasn't figured out? That doesn't seem, or are they just like, are there less margins?
I just look at what
felt
Triumph
approximately.
Go ahead.
You felt approximately the same way, right, Jen? About the I mean, you maybe hated the MT more than anyone I've ever heard.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in my review, it came off pretty harsh. But I did feel that way riding it. I was like, what? Why is this bike so terrible in the corners? And it did surprise me because I've heard all the hype about the MTs, and right. I owned a SV650 for 10 years. So I was in that playing field for quite some time, and when I did finally sell the SV, I can't tell you how many people came out of the woodwork to be like, MT's where it's at, that's what you're gonna get next, like, blah blah blah. Right. I eventually just bought another track bike and neglected to get another street bike, but then for me to come full circle and then finally get to ride and experience the MT, like I already had it like grown in my head. I was like, everyone loves this bike universally, right. So to get on it and ride those tight corners we were in Malibu, I was like, what am I missing? I remember we pulled over and I told you guys, I was like, the suspension's really bad. Like, do you, and you and I, you're like, well, yeah, it's not the best, but like, I was like, no, it's bad. Like I had a very visceral reaction to what that bike did in the corners, and it didn't, make me want to keep riding canyons. I was like kind of nervous, honestly. And that's how I felt on it. So I think you, Zach, maybe you're like, I'm going to ride right through it. You know, like you're an aggressive rider, of course, and you'll ride the wheels off of anything. But for a rider like me, like my confidence was kind of shot. And then every time I got on the Trident, it handled beautifully. Like it was so obedient to everything I was asking of it, to the point where I was trail braking into tight corners and canyons. And I don't do that regularly. And it's certainly not on the first day on an unknown road, on an unknown bike. And I think that speaks to the competency of the Trident. You know, it'll give you that confidence right away. And certainly for a second bike, for a lot of riders out there, like that's probably what you want in your second bike, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I don't think, go ahead, Spurg.
No, I was just going to say, you know, Zach had made the comment earlier about the Triumph quality of the chassis, and I think that's really what they've built their reputation on when you're looking at the entire Triumph product line. Like, they really have nailed it, whether you're looking at, like, the suspension that you're going to get jumping up to, like, a Street Triple R or, you know, or a Speed Triple. Like, they've got a great variety, and they really have that chassis aspect nailed. But I do want to move on. So is there any final thoughts on the MT-07 or the Triumph before we move on?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think it's interesting that, you know, when I ride the MT-07, my main takeaway from the chassis is that it just feels soft. And one of the things I would have expected, excuse me, is someone who is, and I weigh just about 1,200 pounds. Thank goodness not that. I weigh 200 pounds about, and I would have guessed that someone lighter than I am would find that it's maybe a little bit better balanced. Without going into too much detail, Jen is quite a bit lighter than I am, and but she did not have that confidence, and so I that's not something that I would have expected, and I'm so glad that we got that perspective from you, Jen, because I feel like it's easy for me to say like, oh yeah, it's a little sloppy and soft, but like if you just weighed less than I did, it would probably be fine. But you got on the bike and you're like, yeah, I weigh less than you do, and I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. So that's a super salient thing to talk about, that first of all, it's personal opinion. Second of all, sometimes the perception you have of why something is good or not good is not correct. So,
well, I want to move on to the next topic. But one of the things that Jen said was, you know, she talked about how it's not confidence inspiring. And I recently was at the Harley-Davidson Pan America launch, and I believe it was Justin Dawes. We were bombing down this Jeep trail, and I was like, you know, after like 45, 50 miles an hour, really, that's the limit of that bike, right? Like if you're really pushing an adventure bike, like for that bike, that was the limit. And I remember Justin was like, well, what I found was that if you push through the terrifying moment of like 55 to 60 miles an hour, when you come out the other side at like 75, 80, it's actually quite stable. I was like, I'm not pushing through the terrifying moment, man. Like I don't think most people are. So we will jump into the next topic, which we can roll right into the Pan America discussion. But let's get a quick word from our sponsor first. All right, so we're going to jump right back into it. During the break, Zach was telling us that he likes to review motorcycles with his eyes closed. That's how he can really tell if it's got the right feel.
At least one eye closed. You can't really review a motorcycle with any amount of depth perception, in my opinion. It doesn't really work. All right. And for the record, I'm completely kidding. Please keep your eyes open.
I would say that in no way represents the views of Highside, Lowside, or its parent company, RevZilla.
So, Spurg and Dunbar, tell us about the Harley-Davidson Pan America, the first adventure bike from Harley-Davidson, a bombshell, a game changer. Is it everything that everyone hoped it would be? Go.
I mean, I think it surprised the hell out of me. I was going out there. So in fairness, I'm friends with Joe Gustafson, who works for Harley-Davidson. He kept calling me and being like, dude, I'm telling you, you're going to like it. And I've been like, Joe, you're really supposed to like, you know, kind of lower your you know, you're really selling high on this thing.
Right.
But and it's not for me. I'm not going to go get rid of my KTM and buy a Harley-Davidson, but I don't think Harley-Davidson was aiming at that. I think they were really aiming at BMW and the GS audience, and I think they knocked it out of the park for their first iteration. And the main thing to keep in mind here, first of all, there's a review. You can go read it. You can go watch the video. But the main thing was the adaptive ride height control. The fact that you have a suspension that automatically reduces preload when you come to a stop to lower the bike down. And that's if you opt for the special with the electronic suspension. It's an add-on to that. But just the fact to have that, where you can now be looking at a seat height as low as like 28 to 29 inches on an adventure bike, just makes it much more approachable for riders that are shorter and that have been intimidated by these big bikes in the past. And I think that alone, you know, we could talk about the price, we could talk about hydraulic valve lifters, but to me, that adaptive ride height technology is what's going to open it up to so many different riders that have shied away from ADV in the past.
Yeah, That's fair, and I think they should be commended for doing something. The ADV category is pretty packed, and it's arguably moving in the other direction, as our friend Ryan from Fort 9 pointed out at the last episode of last season. Arguably the ADV categories now, it's like moving toward smaller bikes and more simple bikes, and Harley kind of came out swinging with one that's big and complicated. But it's cool that they added something that we haven't seen before. And I know that I've been on adventure rides with readers and viewers over the years, and I remember one in particular where a gal was riding a Multistrada 1200 because you could make it lower than any other bike. A showroom stock bike, you could make the Multistrada 1200 lower than you could make any other bike. And she's like, yeah, that's what I want. I want it to be more manageable when I'm at low speed, which is completely fair.
Well, it's funny because Jen was one of the first people I called, because Jen, much as the fact that she doesn't weigh as much as you, she's not as tall as me. And I remember calling Jen right away, and I was like, because again, for those of you listening, Jen she rips on a dirt bike, but I don't think she has much experience in the adventure world. And I called her. I was like, dude, I want you to try this because I would be really interested to see if you liked it. And Jen was like, I'd be willing to consider that.
You ready to attempt the first ever Harley-Davidson Pan America backflip, Jen? Sounds like.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're getting the ramps ready. No, I think it is really cool that they did that, because I feel like even for a rider who's been on the road as long as I have, I still have, some anxiety about adventure bikes. They do sit so tall. They are so heavy. Yep. And, I've ridden a BMW GS 1200 once on the freeway, and that was it. So I'm trying to imagine this thing off-road, trying to do anything, a little bit more extraneous on it, and it's a little bit scary. So the fact that Harley's doing something like this to make it a little bit more accessible to people, I definitely want to try it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So just I want to throw one quick shameless plug out there. So I've been having conversations, again, Jen and I have been talking a lot. I'm hoping to get her to try it. We are hosting our first Get On Adventure Fest with RevZilla. Zack won't be there because he's going to be up in Alaska doing something special that we're not going to talk about. But July 15th to 18th, we are doing an Adventure Fest out in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And I am hopeful that we'll get to put Jen on a Pan America while we're out there. So anybody that wants more information on that, you should come and hang out with us in the Black Hills on July 15th. There's a little page on RevZilla. You can just Google RevZilla Adventure Fest and you can find all about that.
I've got a bit of FOMO already. I like an adventure rally. One question I want to ask you about the Pan America. This is a question that I often ask about the first iteration of a motorcycle. And I suppose, come to think of it, I should have asked about the Trident, but I didn't. But maybe I still can. The point is, what is version 1.2, or the next iteration of the Pan America? What's one or two changes that you would just make right off the bat?
Move the regulator, rectifier, and battery box so it's not sitting at the bottom of the engine. And that's my number one. And I asked Harley, and their PR manager was like, well, we tested it. And I'm like, give it to me for 6 months. I'll test it. Because they tested it in Arizona in some proving ground where it's dry, right? And I ride in New Jersey where it's a swamp. And I just can't see constantly submerging the battery box and the regular rectifier in brackish salt water of New Jersey that it's going to hold up. So that would be my number one thing. The second iteration that I think they're going to do, or that if I would be doing, is right now it's 7.5 inches of suspension travel. And that is awesome as far as making it an approachable bike for shorter riders. I would love to see something that comes in at the 8.5, 9-inch travel mark that is a little bit more competitive. Think, BMW GS Adventure, or think, KTM 1090, 1290. That's where I would love to see a second iteration as maybe, a special adventure, like a Pan America special ADV / something like that. Those are my two that I'd like to see.
Big surprise. Spurgeon wants the ADV bike to be more hardcore.
I want them to take that approachable bike they made that fits a hole in the market, and I want them to make it just like all the other unapproachable tall machines.
Exactly. You want to make one for Spurgeon Dunbar.
Exactly.
Crusher of suspension.
But it goes back to what I said earlier. They talked about the fact that they're not going after KTM. Really, they recognize that KTM is that, and this is actually one of my points of contention with KTM. They're like, our seat heights are 35 inches. We have for a low seat that's half an inch shorter. But if that doesn't fit you, Tough luck. And they're ignoring a whole segment of the market, and I think that's that's to their detriment. So I do think, again, if they move the regular rectifier, I think that would be enough to make me happy.
Okay.
But yeah, those are my points.
On the topic of tall seat heights, another bike that we wanted to talk about was Kawasaki's KLX 300, which is a bike that it does not have a particularly short seat height. But Jen, you went and rode the KLX 300 and the KLX 300 SM, which is a supermoto version. And I guess I'm wondering if you had like one standout feature for that bike. Like, did you have anything that you were like, man, this one facet really impressed me?
Out of both of them or just one of them? I mean, I know they're very similar.
Yeah, either one.
I think it's just the sum of all its parts. I don't think there's one feature that stands out. It's just collectively they all come together to work so well on this bike. And I guess I don't have experience with the KLX 250, but so if I were to choose on the KLX 300, like what really works on this bike, I think that they made that motor more powerful is probably what it would be then. Because everyone else I talked to that had been on the 250, they're like, oh, it wouldn't do this, it wouldn't do that. And that was all gone on the 300. So the fact that Kawasaki went ahead and bumped that up, I think it made that bike work for a lot more people in a lot more different environments.
And you have a Husky FE. You have an FE 350, is that right?
250.
FE 250. Gotcha. Okay. So, and that's obviously a much more hardcore enduro bike, and the KLX 300 is sort of like a dual sport, arguably even borderline back of an RV bike, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
how did those compare to you, like a sort of more like a little bit more hardcore, gnarly enduro bike versus the KLX? How did it stack up?
Yeah, I mean that's a tough comparison because they're so different in so many aspects. I mean, just look at the price alone; like they're not even close to one another.
Yep.
And the Husky's definitely lighter and it's definitely more powerful. But all that said, like the Kawasaki was still such fun to ride on all the trails we're on. If anything, I hope I do get a long time loaner and I could bring it out to my trails here and do a direct comparison, like ride the FE 250 one day and then hop on the KLX 200 the next day. Because I think that would really paint the picture for me, how drastically different they are. But just, for my time that I had on the KLX 300, I found it to be really competent, especially for its price point. And it's meant to be like a beginner entry level bike, but I could see it servicing a lot of older, more experienced riders as well.
Yeah. So I want to make this delineation for the audience. For those of you that aren't quite aware, there's two KLX 300s. The KLX 300 that Jen rode is the dual sport, has a license plate and blinkers and mirrors. There's also a KLX 300R, which is pure dirt bike. There is no license plate for that bike. And the one thing that I wanted to say is last year I did the review on the KLX 300R, and I was blown away with how good it was. For Jen talks about the price. You could buy two KLX 300Rs for the price of one of my KTM 350s. And Jen's absolutely correct. It doesn't have the suspension. It doesn't have the engine as the KTM, but it's still a lot of fun, and it's half the price. So, yeah.
So, I also wanted to ask about the third KLX 300 because, as you rightly point out, there's the 300 and the 300R. There's also the SM, which comes with 17-inch wheels and street tires. And I guess I'll let you kind of let everyone know what you think of the bike, Jen. But my broad question for you and eventually for Spurgeon is there room for a supermoto, a 300cc supermoto? Was it smart for them to make that bike? Is there demand for that? Is it worth it? Is it good? Like, I don't know. What was your takeaway?
I mean, those are good questions. I kind of mused about it a little bit in my review on Common Tread. Yep. The supermoto scene it's still alive, but it's certainly not what it was back in the day. And it is curious for Kawasaki to all of a sudden come out with a supermoto again. But like I mentioned in the article, there is a little bit of a niche there that none of the other manufacturers have touched with a 300cc street legal supermoto. Yep. There's some bigger ones like from KTM and Husqvarna, and of course they're powerful motors and they're a lot more money. And I think maybe there's still a DRZ on the market, but that's about it. And the DRZ, I think, is a 400 now. So you have to be ready. Do you want a 400 versus 250, 300 kind of power? So, but that all said, I really enjoyed the Supermoto, especially on the go-kart track. It's fine as a street machine. It's going to do all your late commuting. It's going to be good for getting around town. But if you want to go have fun on a go-kart track for cheap money as well, it's more than up to the task. And, I've owned a bunch of Supermotos that are, they're just pure race machines. I've ridden the FS450 a ton, and I would say the fun factor is still there on the KLX 300 SM. If anything, they couldn't get me off the bike, honestly. I was riding it. I was riding it until there's red flags, and they literally stood in the track until I pulled off. That's how much fun it was. So,
right.
I think it's a good bike, and for a lot of riders out there that are just tired of being fed sport bikes in the 250, 300 range, and you want something a little different, it's either a sport bike or a naked bike, right? So now you could get a Supermoto. And I think that's what it's bringing to the table.
Yeah, and the one thing that I wanted to drive home here too is that it's a great, that style motorcycle is great for urban use. And here in Philadelphia, you can't buy a used DRZ 400 Supermoto for under $5,000. They sell for an insane amount of money. So I remember when we were sitting in a common tread meeting, and when they first announced the price of the KLX 300 SM, it was Jen, I think it's $6,000. That sound about right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's $6,000. Yep, right. So everybody was like, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but hold on, because a Suzuki DRZ 400 brand new is almost $7,000, or it's $7,500, and used you can't get them for under $5,000. So the fact that Kawasaki is giving you a brand new option for $300 or for $1,500 less, $6,000, I didn't think it was that expensive at all. And I was the odd man out, but I would be really interested to hear from the audience as to where they think that bike falls in the price point, because for me, the fact that Suzuki has been the only one making it from the Japanese manufacturer, the fact that there is this kind of a desire for that, and the used ones hold their value so well, I think it's going to be a winner for Kawasaki, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. I can certainly imagine someone, saying I want to commute across San Francisco to get to my job, and I don't want to take the train, but I also want to go to a go-kart track on a week. I want to do a track day, but I don't think I'm ready to spend $300 on going to Sonoma or Thunderhill or something like that. These are all California landmarks that I'm throwing out there. The point is, I want to go to a go-kart track and bop around on a track day and slide around that would be a perfect bike, right? You could do both of those things. There's a case study out there that's perfect for it. And I agree. You're not wrong about the DRZ thing either, Spurgeon. It's so common for you to see them listed as it's got an FMF pipe and it's super tight, and it's $5,600.
Yeah.
It was designed in 1956. Yeah. How are you trying to sell that bike for that much money? But you've seen it for years now. So yeah, I agreed. Maybe this 300 SM is the antidote, and maybe people will be just as stoked on it.
You make a great point, because I think a lot of times we say commuter bike, and there's a big disparity in what people think of with a commuter bike, right?
Yeah, totally true.
If you're living out in Kansas and you're commuting 50 miles to the horse farm, because I'm assuming that's what you do if you live in Kansas.
Oh my God.
But you want something big and stable to cruise down the highway. But if you're living in San Francisco or Philadelphia, a great commuter bike is one that you can zip around the city really easily. So there is that to factor in.
And to bring it full circle, Jen, I don't remember what the seat height is exactly, but they're pretty tall bikes, and I believe from reading your review, you found them pretty reasonable to use despite the tall seat height, and you're not a super tall person yourself.
Yeah, no, the Supermoto was definitely shorter, and I was on the balls of my feet comfortably. It was just fine, and of course the dirt version, the KLX 300, was a bit taller. But I think they did a good job of keeping that U-line, or, that kind of inseam, nice and tidy and compact. So a lot of people seem to forget, even when we just take a yardstick and we measure it, from ground to seat height, that's not the full story. How wide is that seat, and everything else that's happening in the cockpit, how that can affect how a bike rides is super critical as well. So they did a good job keeping it tidy in there. So
yeah, we noticed that, on the MT-07 and Trident when we were riding those bikes. I remember the you'd assume that the MT-07 would be narrower because the parallel twin and the Trident is a triple. But we found that the Trident was more approachable and it felt narrower between the legs than the MT-07 did, which I thought was interesting. I think we all were surprised. You and Ari and myself, Spencer, we were all kind of like, wow, that's weird. You'd assume that the MT would be narrower and more approachable, but the Trident actually was, because they designed it, as you said, to have that standover height that's more reasonable. So yeah,
Exactly.
big difference. So Spurgeon, you got something to say?
I want to divert the conversation very quickly before we jump into, because we have a bunch of other bikes that we've ridden. But I think, we were just talking about the price of used DRZs and that aspect of this.
And you just pulled up a Craigslist ad.
Yeah, I'm shopping over here. But no, this is a great opportunity to pivot into having a quick discussion about just what the pandemic has done for motorcycling, and really what we're seeing as we roll into the heart of riding season for 2021. We just had an article on Common Tread about, I feel like at this point everybody has read about the container ship in the Gulf,
right. The Ever Given,
in Egypt. Yeah, is it the Ever Given? Is that what it was?
Ever Given, yes.
But there was an article that Yamaha and Ducatis were on there. Now they're holding that ship hostage until like the owner pays, I think it's like $300 million or something in fees for all the revenue lost. It's hard to find a motorcycle right now. So all these great bikes that we're talking about, I don't know if any of you have been to a showroom recently, but like it's actually kind of slim pickings if you're trying to buy a new motorcycle right now.
And just to be clear, I don't think the technical term in international trade is holding the ship hostage. I think that's a little different. That was more of a Captain Phillips vibe. I think it's like being held in Egyptian customs or whatever it is. But yeah, and I think it's safe to say that the video reference in that Common Tread article was from Yamaha Europe, and obviously boats going, shipments coming from Asia to Europe go through Suez Canal, which is so more of an effect on European market than the U.S. As far as we understand it. But Spurgeon's point is still valid, which is that we have had this sort of like surge in enthusiasm, and that has not been matched by the
supply,
ability to move goods around.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little bit slim, which is interesting. Did you were still working with Husky and Gas when the pandemic was happening, Jen? Did you have any kind of insight there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think like most people did, there was a bit of panic in the industry at first, and I wouldn't be surprised if some orders were canceled or this or that on the supply chain side. And then all of a sudden we realized we have such a huge, massive demand, and then to uncancel those orders wasn't going to happen.
Well, they said with the Pan America that it was supposed to hit shores. They were supposed to have it in the fall of last year, and it's been delayed. It'll be hitting dealerships this May, which I guess by the time this podcast airs will be about a month ago. But that was part of the problem. Was there was a plastics issue. They couldn't get certain plastic pieces, was part of the problem.
And it's interesting, right? That Harley-Davidson, you'd be like, hit shores. It's an American bike. Then what do you mean hit shores?
But you're still buying Brembo brakes. You're putting Showa suspension on it. Like
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing, is that the engines are made in America and the bikes are manufactured in America as far as put together. But we are a global supply chain at this point. Like Jen hit the point about orders. Like everybody freaked out when the pandemic happened, even for RevZilla. Like you Zack, you were working here. Like orders just stopped coming in. So, you don't order for the next, the next supply. And now all of a sudden we can't get stuff over fast enough. Where Zack he's out in Long Beach. You can look out in the Long Beach Pier and there's ships piled up in the water because they can't unload the stuff fast enough. So it's just crazy. A really weird situation right now where the popularity of motorcycle has spiked. So
yeah, good problem to have, I suppose, in the long run, hopefully.
If you're looking to sell a bike, right? So I mean, fun fact, I just sold my 1090, and this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's the perfect time to sell a bike. The problem is I went to buy an 890, and they're like, there's none. So you're going to have to wait. So I'm in this weird limbo right now where like I just sold my bike. I'm very happy about that. I mean, it's bittersweet. I love that bike, but I'm very excited to make a jump into the next piece of ownership that I'll have. But it's a great time to sell. It's a hard time if you're trying to be competitive with buying.
Well, to pivot a little bit and sort of use this global supply chain thing, and also seat heights, which we were talking about earlier. Since no one will ask me, despite all the eye contact I've been making with people about bikes that I have ridden recently, I will just like to say that I thought it was interesting riding the 2022 Indian FTR-S, which has been updated. I made the same comment in my article that it has Italian brakes and it has a Slovenian exhaust system and it's got German suspension, and it is in some ways doing a sort of imitation of a European bike now. But yeah, it is. I think people would look at that bike and say that it's wholly American, from the style to the engine to, the sort of ethos that it has. But as we're saying, still suffers some of the same consequences of being a
I don't
part of a global economy.
think you can look at any bike and say it's purely a sum of its nationality, right? Like, we live in a global
right.
economy, and all these different pieces make you pick the best brakes, you put the best suspension on it, and you make the best motorcycle. Jen, did you get a chance to ride the FTR when you were at the office?
No, but I've ridden an older version. I did have a question for Zack about that, because I think this year is when they've transitioned to 17-inch wheels, where I think the previous generation I was on, it was a little bit more flat track inspired. It had the 18-inch wheels on it. I just want to hear from you, like, did you notice a difference in how it rides and handles, and do you miss the look of it being a little more true to its flat track form? Are you okay with its new aesthetics?
That's a good question, and I do miss the way that it looked with the 18-19 wheel combo, because the big front wheel makes it look like a flat tracker, right? It looks more like the bike that it's sort of supposed to look like. But I can't say that they went the wrong direction with that. Like, if everyone actually wanted a flat track bike, if flat track was actually as popular as everyone sort of like thinks it is or wants it to be. I was talking to Andy Greaser about this, and he said if flat track was that popular, all the stadiums would be full. All the races would be like, they'd be selling out. It would be unbelievably popular. But unfortunately, it's not really from that perspective. I think people want the aesthetic. They like the round headlight. They like the low gas tank. They like the sort of the flat track style. But realistically, what they want is something that works like a real motorcycle works, like a street motorcycle works, and street motorcycles in this era have 17-inch wheels. So that's what they did. And I do think that it improved the bike. It pushed it a step or a half step toward a BMW R9T, a Triumph Street Twin, Speed Twin. Those bikes that sort of have that, I don't know, they have more of a reputation for being bikes that handle well and also have like a little bit of brute force. So I think they did the right thing.
I rode the same model that Jen did. I rode when the bike first came out, we did a big review on one. And I think that while it looked like a flat tracker, it was still like a 550-pound beast that was not fun to ride off-road. And I think the biggest problem that I had with Indian, with the original marketing for that bike, was they showed these guys running up these berms and like doing all this crazy off-road stuff. And I'm a okay adventure rider off-road, and I remember taking that bike off-road and being terrified. Like, the foot pegs sit on an angle, which is great for sporty riding, but when you try to stand up on them, you feel like you're falling over all the time. So my point in saying all that is that when I saw that they were announcing that they were bringing it out with 17s, I was extremely excited, because the other piece of this is that the original 1918 combination was very difficult to find tires for. And those tires that came on it were decent tires, but they also wore out within like 2,000 miles for the rear.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can get pure sport bike rubber for that bike now, and that engine has a lot of character, there's a lot of fun to have there, but you can now use real tires on it, I think that's pretty cool.
What was your impression of it when you rode the previous generation, Jen? What did you think it needed to be the bike that you wanted it to be?
I mean, I loved it, actually. I was like, here it is. Like, as soon as there's a used market on these things, I'm getting a street bike, and it's going to be an FTR.
Oh,
nice.
It was like
brand new. Yeah. I mean, I've got enough, dedicated sport bikes in the garage, and I certainly have enough dedicated off-road bikes. And I've just, for street riding, I've been looking for I want it to have some attitude. I want to be excited to ride it. And it doesn't have to be like a complete slayer, on the performance categories.
Right.
And I actually had a chance to ride it when I was at Sturgis working with Sena Bluetooth. Rode out to Mount Rushmore and back and everything. And for that kind of riding, it handled just fine. So, I don't think I would get it and expect to be a canyon slayer or anything on it, but I want to ride to downtown San Diego and feel like a badass. So that's the bike I would probably do it on.
So
now tires will be easier, so that would be good too.
I guess was it purely the style? Was it the engine? What was it? I mean, if you're talking about like you were actually thinking about buying one, that's impressive. So like what was it about that specific bike that really spoke to you?
I mean, it gripped me first with the styling. I saw a lot of photos of it. I'm like, yes, like this looks amazing. And then I rode it, and then the motor was phenomenal too. Like I thought it had like a lot of character. It was powerful. It was awesome. So, and it handled just fine. We did get into some twisties out there heading to Mount Rushmore, and I was like, this is good, and I feel awesome on it. So
yeah,
it's just a little too pricey, but also I'm pretty frugal when it comes to bikes. I wait till they all go used till I get them.
Yeah, I think that could be said about a lot of bikes right now. I mean, you're looking at the FTR, and I know that original bike when it came out with the S package, I think was like 16.9, or it was definitely up there. It was a pricey machine.
Yep, none to sneeze at. You guys can, especially Jen, you can rest assured that the new bike handles even better, I think. So, and as Spurgeon said, you can put sport rubber on it, sport touring rubber if you want, which is nice. One thing I did talk about seat heights, and just to prove that I'm not crazy, one thing I did find interesting about the new bike as well. So it got 17-inch wheels, which of course brings the whole bike down, because you lose overall seat height if the wheels are smaller. And they also removed an inch and change, 1.2 inches or something like that, of suspension travel, which it didn't have a ton before. I want to say it had
5.5 inches before.
Yeah, I want to say it went from 5.7 to 4.5 or something like that, or 5.9 to 4.7, whatever. The point is, I thought it was interesting that they removed stroke or travel from the suspension. But one thing that it did, those two things combined, was bring the seat height much, much lower. So I think it was 33.1 or something on the previous one. I'm estimating these numbers because I'm struggling to remember, but now it's 30.7 or something. And one thing that tickled the back of my brain when I was thinking about this is I wonder if a 33-inch seat height in an Indian dealership was especially challenging and difficult. Like, do you guys think that having a seat height that's 30.5 or 30.7 inches or whatever makes a big enough difference that people be more willing to try that bike? Because think about all the other bikes in the Indian dealership. Like a Scout has like a 27-inch seat height or whatever, and all the cruisers are really low. I feel like that might be part of it.
I just rode the Indian Chief Dark Horse with a
Spurgeon. We're talking about bikes I rode for once.
No, but what I'm saying is that if I was to sit on an Indian Chief Dark Horse with a 26-inch seat height, which was for me way too low. Like my only real problem with that bike was I'm 6'3". I wasn't comfortable. I felt scrunched up on it. But 26 inches to like 33 inches, I would assume that the FTR, even as it's been lowered, is still pretty intimidating for a lot of people. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels that way, but
Jen? Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about the spread from 26 inches to 33, that's insane. That's huge. Whereas 26 to 30, you're kind of like, well, maybe.
But it goes back to the point about Harley-Davidson. I think Harley-Davidson had to release an adventure bike that was approachable because that's really what their audience, that's what their core demographic is used to. Like that audience likes to have their feet firmly on the ground.
Right.
I think the FTR is Indian's attempt to bring in riders that typically aren't Indian shoppers. So all those people who walked in, I think the FTR should continue to be like a very different machine on the showroom floor, and that's what it's for. It's for like those younger riders who kind of want like more a sport oriented machine, but they don't want a sport bike, and the other naked bikes out there haven't really gotten them where they want it to, and like it's a very unique machine. So I think for it to, the Scout Bobber and the Chieftain, all these are like, they're very traditional cruisers, right?
Yep.
And I think Indian was like, all right, we got to attract more than just that. And that's what the FTR is. So it is a big gap between the two seat heights, but again, it's a radically different machine for them. I think they're just testing the waters of finding brand new people to walk in their door. And that's what that bike is. It did to me. I don't normally look at Indians, but then all of a sudden the FTR came out. I'm like, well, I got to go see this thing.
I have a question for you, Jen. So you come from the sales background side of things. So I would be interested. I mean, I get that it was a play to acquire, it was a new customer acquisition play, right? But do you think that it's still not something that's important to be able to, attract the core Indian demographic?
Are you saying the FTR doesn't attract those people at all?
I guess that's my question for you. Do you think that it
Yeah.
does? Like, do you think that if somebody's walking into an Indian dealership, would you try to sell your existing base on the FTR, or would you just say, no, they're going to go buy what they're going to buy. Let's bring in new people, for this model?
I mean, certainly worth mentioning. And as much as we in marketing and sales would like to just put everyone in their nice, neat little boxes, humans are unique individuals, and you can't just go ahead and label them all as you would like. So I think for sure there's got to be some legacy Indian riders out there that saw the FTR and felt something. And don't get me wrong, like I do think it's a more radical machine for them. But you look at it, and I feel like I'm still looking at it Indian. And I think maybe because they've put so much of their eggs into that flat track basket. They've got a really strong team. They've been involved in it a long time. So I feel like the DNA and the heritage is still strong in the FTR. It's an Indian. But again, it's just very refreshing, because when I look at the Scout or whatever else, I'm like, it's just not for me. And I look at the FTR, I'm like, that might be for me.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. Yep.
I can see, I think it's encouraging because I can see someone having an Indian Chieftain or a touring bike or a cruiser or a Scout or whatever in their garage and thinking, yeah, I like this bike, and I like using it for what it's for, but secretly thinking like, oh man, like I rode my buddy's Ducati Monster, a couple years ago, and like, man, that bike kicks so much ass, but like I can't buy something Italian. Everyone's going to make fun of me. So then they have this FTR, and they're like, oh wow, that's this speaks to me, because it's something that I secretly, even though I'm an Indian guy or I'm an American V twin guy or whatever, I want to go down that road, and I can see that person being interested in it. And the other side of that coin, or the flip side of that analogy or whatever, is that I can see someone doing sort of what you guys were implying, which is saying like, well, I want to get a Ducati Monster, but I don't want to be like everyone else. So what's a bike that I can get that's like that? And they either have a twinge of national pride, or they have whatever, and they're just sort of like, wow, that's cool. That's another option. And I'm not interested in cruisers or American V twins particularly at all, but that bike's just way too cool to ignore. And I think it's cool that it's rad that both of those people could potentially be interested in that bike.
I think it would be, and that's the big thing with Harley-Davidson right now. One of the questions that popped up is, are they going to use that engine in anything else that's in the Pan American? I think they're stupid not to. It's a great engine. The fact that they're talking about discontinuing the Bronx, or not releasing the Bronx, which was a naked sport bike, I think is a miss, because that American V-twin and like a naked sport bike, that, like Jen said, it's something different that does appeal to you. I think is a real winning combination.
Yeah, that was the joke I was gonna make about the Pan America engine. Like, what if they just put it in like sort of a naked bike?
Called it
like a flat handlebar.
What are the other, like we could call it the Brooklyn maybe? Does Brooklyn roll
exactly.
off the tongue? So I want to wrap this up with, I'm going to actually throw a question right your way, Zach, because I think you rightfully so implied that you were asking yourself your own question. So we'll throw one right at you to close this out. One of the bikes that I think we've all been excited about was the Aprilia RS 660. That was one that I know that you guys all rode and loved last year. But you had a recent opportunity to ride the Tuono 660, and I believe it turned out to be a little bit more varied and different than the RS than you were expecting. How did you like the Tuono from Aprilia?
Is that implication that you read my article, Spurg?
I read some of your articles, Zach.
Sure, understood. The upshot with the Tuono 660 to me was that it's just, as a street bike, it's just better than the RS 660. The RS 660 is a very agreeable, comfortable street bike for a sport bike, but it's still a sport bike. And you're still leaned over a little bit, and it's still a little bit uncompromising. And the Tuono 660 just sort of like puts you more upright and more comfortable, and it doesn't really give up anything in the suspension department. It technically does, but it's still very good. And the engine is the same, and the electronics are the same, and the brakes are the same, and everything else is the same. So you get for $800 fewer dollars, I think it was, something like that, whatever, a little bit less money, you get largely the same performance with more comfort. And yeah, I can't help but be impressed with that bike. It's like $10,500 for 100 horsepower, sort of mid-sized bike with a TFT dash and good electronics and solid brakes and good chassis. It's bitchin'.
Jen, did you get to ride that one when you were out there?
No.
I think we had that one just before Jen joined up, so didn't get a chance to ride that, which is too bad. I'd be super curious what you think of that, especially in the whole engine conversation we were having, Jen, because the Tuono that 660 Aprilia engine hits really hard. It's got a lot of power, but it has this spoiler alert, massive hole in the revs at it's like 5,000 or like 5 to 7,000 RPM, which is kind of like right in the meat of. It's got pretty good torque down low. Like getting away from a stoplight is good. And when you make it sing, it really punches out a lot of power. But it's got a weird hole in the delivery, or the ones that at the press launch, the ones that I rode did anyway, which is kind of a shame. And I don't know what else to say except that I feel it almost feels fair because it's the same size engine as like a SV650 or an MT-07 or something, but it makes 40 more horsepower. And you're like, well, what's the catch? Well, maybe the catch is that it has a hole in the rev range. But
or maybe
anyway.
the price. I imagine it's got to be a bit more.
It is, yeah. That's
25. It's like $2,500 more, right?
Yeah, it's 10. I think it's 10.5 or 10.4.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we were saying, an MT-07 is $7,700, and an SV650 is around there. I think $8,000, something like that. So yeah, it is a lot more money. That's fair.
But out of all of those bikes, it's the one that when they showed it, I think it was EICMA originally. Like I remember seeing the pictures and being like, dude, like that's my favorite. Like the RS660 is the one that caught my eye. And then when they announced the Tuono version, I just think Aprilia from an aesthetic point of view, it just looks sharp.
It does.
So,
yeah. They certainly have some styling stuff figured out. Also, did you guys happen to see that there's did you see the press release for the Tuono 125 and the RS 125 and Tuono 125?
No, tell us more.
Yeah.
I think if we got the press release, they must be releasing them in the United States, and I think they've had these in Europe for a while in varying iterations. But yeah, 125cc 4-stroke single, but you can get a little Tuono. It's like a little baby Tuono, like a little
street legal or just for the track?
Yeah. No, like a
Grom kind of competitor.
Yeah,
almost?
like a Grom Tuono, except I think it's bigger. I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like a Grom, I don't know, a Grom and then like a Madass or a Kimco and then a Tuono 125 would be a pretty sweet little comparo.
Well, anyway, I thought you were going to say they all walk into a bar. What do they order?
Exactly.
Well, I know.
I think clever. I might come up with a punchline, but
I out of all the bikes that when I came out to Cali to visit you guys, I was very disappointed that you had to give that one back. It sounds like that had to be given back before Jen got a chance to ride it too. So I think we'll have to put on our to-do list, Jen, a long-term loaner from Aprilia for that one.
and sign me up for a Tuono 125.
Yeah. We'll put that right against the Kimco scooter, and we'll have a good time. So
bomb around Long Beach.
That being said, I think we've come to the end of the conversation for today. I know it was quite a doozy, but Jen, I just want to say thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
I just have one more. Sorry to cut you off, Spurg. I just have one more question that I meant to ask you in the beginning, but I didn't want to derail the conversation when we were giving those lightning round questions. The CB, you said you have a CB360. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Is that your first race bike?
Yes.
The one, it is.
Yeah, it's actually a mashup. It's both me and my dad got CB360s so we could swap parts or whatever. And then when I moved to California, I left it at home because I was like, oh, the tracks are really big and fast out in California. Like, I don't want to pop motors and stuff. I'm just going to leave it at home. So Dad took it upon himself to build the biggest and baddest CB360 out of the two. So he took all of his favorite parts off of them and combined it into one. And so that's what's in the garage now.
Wow.
That's
nifty.
awesome.
Yeah.
And was that the bike that you were riding a CB360 at your first track day, I believe, right? Which we learned later I was at, I think.
Yeah, we're in photos together. We had no idea who each other was, though. You're helping out Carrie Smith, and
that's right.
I'm creeping in the background with my bright yellow fisherman's jacket on because it was raining, of course.
Obviously.
That's Loudon for you.
Yep. Right on.
And that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. So you still have a version of that bike anyway. Still exists in your garage. That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it forever. That's a forever bike for sure.
Right on.
Yeah, I feel like that's entirely another podcast. Is like forever bikes,
is.
like the bikes that we all own that just won't get sold. But for right now, we are going to move on and do Highside, Lowside, listener and viewers comments. But Jen, thank you for joining us, and we're going to bid you adieu.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
All right, so this has been a tremendously fun kickoff to Season 4. We still have to get into the viewers' comments and listeners' comments, which is arguably one of my favorite portions of the video because we get to basically highlight and sometimes throw shade, sometimes give recognition for some of the comments that are left for us. And for those of you that are, again, joining in for the first time, these are comments that are either pulled from the YouTube video. They are also pulled from you shooting us an email to highside, lowside @RevZilla.com. Or you can also leave us an iTunes review, and that will win you a free T-shirt.
It can win you a free T-shirt, we should say.
Yes, it can.
Sometimes.
You don't get a free T-shirt just for leaving a comment or a review. But
That
let's
needs
kick
to be,
things
that
off.
needs to be very clear. Yeah.
All right.
So you go first.
No, I would say you want to go first? I mean, I feel like your Australian accent is probably better than mine, and frankly,
Jesus.
you have to read comment 1 in an Australian accent.
No, I won't embarrass myself by doing that. I do love this comment though. It comes in from down under, as Spurgeon points out, and it reads, "I live and work in hot and tropical northern Australia. I commute to work every day on my Versa 650, very nice, and drive a fast ferry for a living. Sounds like a great life." This person, Evie, how do you think you pronounce that name,
Evie.
Spurgeon?
I would say Evie from Down Under is
Evie from Down Under. Evie says, "Love listening to your banter whilst at sea. I wanted to comment on the weather episode, which is season 3, episode 5. I ride through tropical wet season here, often commuting in severe thunderstorms. I think many riders would benefit from hearing some of your tips regarding techniques for riding in the rain and storms." So Evie rightly points out that we did not address that. We sort of talked about cold. We talked about riding when it's hot. But a tropical thunderstorm is an interesting thing because you're not really you're not cold from the rain.
Right.
You're not uncomfortable because it's wet. But it does provide and present some interesting riding challenges. So what would your response be here, Spurge?
Absolutely. So I kind of touched on this a little bit because I talked about riding through a hurricane. But when we were reading through this comment, the one that reminded me the most of Evie's question was at the end of the it was the Tiger 800 XCX review. We were shooting out in central Pennsylvania, and it was a 3-hour ride home on the highway. And just as I was about to get onto the highway, the rain started. It was like a light drizzle. And by the time I made it to like the on-ramp for the highway, it was torrentially raining, and it didn't stop. Like, it was almost comical. Like, I got home, pulled into the garage, and then the rain stopped. But for a good 3-hour stretch, it was absolutely pouring. And my only advice for anyone out there riding in the rain, and this is actually, it goes back to a comment too that Zack and I answered in season 3 from a listener that said they didn't want to get caught in the rain. They were afraid of it ruining their experience. All you have to do is slow down. For me, it's getting a good set of tires. There's definitely tires that perform better in wet weather than not, and that's 100% fact. But a good set of all-weather tires, and then just turn it down by like 10 miles an hour. And if you have a glove with a little windshield wiper thingy on it to clean off your visor, that's another added bonus. Because obviously, if you can't see, if it starts fogging up on you, that's probably going to be the scariest part.
Yeah, so that was one thing I was definitely going to say is if you're riding at speed, especially in the rain, a good technique is to gently turn your head to the side. That'll help water blow off your face shield, which in my opinion is much better than wiping with your hand, which in a desperate situation works, but it also can really fudge things up. Again, I think I mentioned this in the podcast that we did before, but a pin lock insert for the visor or some sort of anti-fog system, I think can make a huge difference. That way you can keep your visor snapped shut and sealed, so you won't get water on the inside of your face shield, which of course will not blow away in the wind because it will be shielded from the wind. But you also will not get fog on your shield. I think that makes a big difference because visibility in the rain can be a big problem. The other thing I would say, think critically about where you are riding and what the conditions are, because a lot of times even on a paved road there'll be kind of like troughs in the road from heavy trucks or something like that. That's where puddles are going to accumulate. Obviously it's harder for your bike to have traction whether you're accelerating or decelerating in standing water. That makes things more difficult. And keep in mind that especially when it first starts raining, of course this is a classic driver's ed thing, but that's when oil will seep up to the surface when it first starts. So that's something especially in Los Angeles, is very pertinent because it only rains every 6 months. But sounds like in tropical Australia, where Evie's from, that's not as big a problem. But I'd say just like take a step back, think about the situation that you're in and where water is going to pool, where it might be dangerous to be, splashing from cars, that kind of thing. Like give yourself more space from cars so you're not in the spray. Just think it through a little bit. I think that'll help.
The one note I want to make there, because Zach, you made two comments on the points you made. First and foremost, we talk about the first 15 minutes of a rainfall is when all that oil comes to the surface. But also, depending on where you're at in the road, so many people I see like to ride straight down the middle of the road. But that's where all of the oil sits, because if you think about a car, the tire tracks are on the outside of the lane, and all that oil that's dropping is in the middle. So you should really be riding to the inside or the outside of the lane. You really shouldn't be riding down the middle, especially in rainfall. But the other part of that too was you were talking about anti-fog inserts. I've seen a lot of people write in over the years to Common Tread articles about, can you use Rain-X on the inside of your visors? I remember my first motorcycle trip getting caught in the rain. I was coming back from Bar Harbor, Maine, and I was driving back home to Allentown, and I got stuck in like an 8-hour rainstorm. And I remember stopping to buy Rain-X, because this was before anti-fog inserts. I didn't find that it worked. I found that it just kind of smeared up the inside of my face shield, and it actually made it harder to see out of. I wouldn't recommend Rain-X. I think Zach's point about just cracking it just a little bit is what I typically do. And I've had good luck with that. But just a little fun fact there, I haven't had success with Rain-X whatsoever.
Yeah, the Rain-X anti-fog stuff, I've had mixed results with as well. And yeah, if you're moving at a decent rate of speed, cracking can help. But again, I think, like I maybe perhaps I disagree with you, Spurgeon. You crack the shield, it lets water in, from the top. So if you can keep it sealed, that's always better. Anyway, what I was going to say on the Rain-X front.
It does let water in. You have a few drops, it'll drip down, but like it doesn't bother me because you're still at speed. It's still blowing over you for the most part. So yeah, I do the crack the shield little method. And we can disagree. We don't have to agree on everything, buddy. I'm okay with that.
Fair enough. I find a pin lock insert, for example, is pretty good, especially at low speed, because you don't have any ventilation. One thing I will say about Rain-X, they do, I have had decent luck, and I think they recommend against this on the bottle, so you might be going against the grain, but there's Rain-X treatments for windshields that help water,
bead off.
Bead off, thank you very much. And I did apply that to a motorcycle visor one time and had pretty good luck in the rain. You're less likely to get water beating up that's harder to see through. So I think, I don't know about you, Spurgeon. I think we've talked about rain enough. I hope Evie is satisfied with that answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that we could always do another like hardcore weather podcast episode, but I think for right now, like that's a good little addition. So let's move on to Kyle. And Kyle is writing in, and he says, "Howdy, Spurgeon Zack. After reading reviews and hearing Ryan Fortnine on the latest episode of the podcast," so he is writing in after season 3, episode 12, he wants to say that he's pleasantly surprised by the Harley Pan America. It's the perfect bridge machine for a company looking to become a more performance-oriented brand. The next step for Harley-Davidson is to gain performance, street credibility. The next step in Harley-Davidson gaining street performance credibility is to sponsor a Moto 2 team. It's the perfect place to get them to go road racing, since there's no choice but to use Triumph engines, and the chassis aren't made by other bike manufacturers. So he feels that is what America needs from Harley-Davidson.
Well, I absolutely love your enthusiasm, Kyle. And I think that in a lot of ways, you're right. That's, Harley-Davidson does not have to make an engine. So just to clarify Kyle's point, Moto 2 racing, which is the intermediate class of MotoGP, every team uses, including KTM, they use a Triumph engine. They use a Triumph 765cc triple that are spec engines. Everyone gets the same engine. You make your own chassis, and then you go racing. So Harley-Davidson could do that. They could even just like put money behind a team, right? Like they could just sponsor a random team that uses any old chassis and just have Harley-Davidson on the side of the bike. I personally would love that. I don't think that they're going to do that, though. I don't think that they think that.
I don't think it's the most financially sound decision.
And yeah, if you've been reading the news lately, financials aren't necessarily great for Harley-Davidson these days. So I don't think they have the kind of discretionary income that they would need to spend on that kind of thing. And I also I think that that's a bridge too far. I think that a Pan America is a big step for them. Putting their logo on the side of a race bike in an international race series is probably not going to happen.
I forgive my history here. Didn't Harley-Davidson own MV Agusta at one point?
Perhaps.
Or
that sounds familiar.
I think they
or they were going to buy them. We should really know this.
Yeah.
We're really opening a window to our ignorance.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that, but I could have sworn that they had an ownership stake at one point in MV Agusta. Yeah. And if they were going to go racing, I figured it would be with that. But I think that Kyle, I think it's a great point. And I love that you're thinking outside the box with this. I would love to see Harley-Davidson bring the Bronx to the market at a $12,500 price point, $12,500, because if the Pan America is as good as it is right out of the box, if they could bring a very competitive naked sport bike to the market with about 105-ish horsepower, I think that would be awesome. So that's really the challenge that I'm throwing out to Harley-Davidson right now, and I'm sure that there's many executives over there, waiting to see what my opinion is on it. But that's what I would love to see them do next.
Yeah. So good comment, Kyle, and I will cross my fingers that happens just as you are, but unfortunately I don't like our chances. Last question is from Alex, who says very to the point, why is the Diavel in a class of its own? Am I the only person that wants a long and low cruiser for Midwest highways, but also wants to rip the skin off my face with 160 horsepower? He goes on to say, yes, there's the Suzuki M109R. People if they want to buy a 15-year-old design, and there's the VMAX, which is fading into obscurity. Why has the market died? Spurg and Dunbar, what do you have to say to Alex?
I feel like Alex missed a key pizza delivery-esque machine.
That he did.
In the fact that he didn't talk about the Triumph Rocket 3. And the Triumph Rocket 3 has more displacement than my last car. So I think if you're talking about the Diavel, it's really hard to talk about that bike and not compare it to the Triumph Rocket 3. But then also, to Kyle's point, what's the demand? I'm sorry, Alex's point. Kyle was our previous guy. Sorry. What's the demand like for these big bikes? The Rocket 3 is $25,000, $25,000, somewhere around there.
20 something.
23.5,
low 20s. Yeah.
23.5 maybe. But the Diavel's got to be up there as well. And it's a great bike, but it's kind of a one-trick pony, I would argue. So.
Well, Alex says it's a two-trick pony because he's got long and low cruiser for Midwest highways, and he can pull the skin off his face with 160 horsepower. I think
if you're not pulling the skin off your face, Zach, are you really riding?
Exactly. Well, I will say that I agree with Alex in so much as I love those bikes. Diavel, Rocket 3, they're super fun for the reasons that have been stated. They have a certain aesthetic, they have a certain style, a certain set of ergonomics that people like. A standard Diavel or Rocket 3, I think, is actually a fairly comfortable bike. It's pretty reasonable ergonomically, and it's fun that it has a crap ton of power on tap. I think they're wicked.
I call bull. Would you spend $23,000 to put one of those in your garage?
If I was going to buy a cruiser of any kind, it would be a Diavel or a Rocket 3. I wouldn't.
If I gave you $23,000 right now, is that what you would buy? If I gave you $23,000 and said you can go buy any bike out there.
I'm talking like fourth or fifth bike in my dream garage. I think they're wicked. It's not what I want necessarily, but I love that Ducati built a cruiser and they didn't copy Harley-Davidson, or they didn't copy anyone else. They said, we're going to build a cruiser, but we're going to do it Ducati style, and it handles great, and it does wheelies, and it's wicked fast. It's awesome. I think it's a really cool bike. But to your point, Spurge, no, it's not really my cup of tea necessarily, but I do think it's wicked. And I think to get to the answer to Alex's question, I don't think the market has died. I think that there just isn't a big enough market to demand more bikes like that being produced. And if you don't want, M109R and a VMAX are long in the tooth, but do deliver a certain something. And the Diavel and the Rocket 3 are current contemporary versions of that. And if you want something other than those four bikes, I think you might just be being greedy for what you want. You're just you're a niche in the market,
But I will say this is that perhaps Alex hasn't heard of the Rocket 3, so maybe we're educating Alex on that, or maybe they just forgot. But what I will say is that I think, Zach, that's the point that I want to leave people with, is that he did talk about these other bikes getting long in the tooth, but the Rocket 3 is new. The Rocket 3 was completely redesigned, less than 2 years ago, and that's an investment I wasn't expecting to see from Triumph, to be completely frank. So the fact that you have that, and you do have a very competitive up-to-date Diavel to go head-to-head. Those are the two that I would say are sitting at the top of that, niche market.
Yeah. 2,500 cc's. What more could you want?
That's a lot of cubic centimeters.
It's a lot of cubic centimeters. Okay, so those are the questions we had earmarked. I hope that the folks that asked those questions, the happy customer and the happy customer won the T-shirt. My bad. So it was Evie from Australia. It was Kyle who wants Harley-Davidson to go Moto2 racing, and it was Alex who wants more performance cruisers. I hope you guys are satisfied with those answers. I hope you're still listening. And on the topic of happy customers, we should remind happy customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that they should write us an email to highsidelowside@revzilla.com to claim their free T-shirt.
Yeah, and if you haven't already done so, please make sure you subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. And as always, please make us, please leave us an Apple iTunes review. Zach and I read them. We take into account all of your feedback, and we send out that free T-shirt. So again, if you wanna leave us comments, you can always do so on YouTube. You can always shoot an email over to highsidelowside@revzilla.com. But most importantly, it's that Apple iTunes review that we thank you so much for. And again, like we talked about in the beginning, big thank you to all of you out there for making Highside Lowside such a successful podcast. It means the world to both Zach and myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do our best not to disappoint you in season 4. I feel like we had a pretty good kickoff here. Happy to introduce you to Jen and chew over these bikes that we've been riding, and just have to wait for next time to see what the topic will be. But rest assured, Spurg and I will be ready to waste yet more of your time. Until then,
I was going to say enjoy the ride, but that's too formal for this. Until then, we'll see you on the road.
See you, everybody.